The night was heavy with storm clouds, the kind that pressed against the windows and filled the sky with restless energy. Rain lashed against the tall glass panes of the Blackwood estate, lightning cutting through the darkness every few minutes. Inside, the mansion stood in cold silence, its walls echoing only the ticking of an antique clock. Adrian Blackwood sat in his grand study, a glass of whiskey in his hand. The fireplace burned, but it did nothing to soften his sharp expression. He was a man carved out of steel, broad-shouldered, dressed in a tailored suit, his dark hair slicked back, his eyes cold as winter frost. For years, people had feared the weight of his voice, the decisions he made that could raise empires or crush them overnight. But tonight, his command was not about business. His gaze cut toward the butler standing at the doorway. With a voice, deep, firm and absolute, Adrian ordered, "Bring my wife home." Now, the room seemed to shrink with the weight of those words. The butler, an elderly man who had served him loyally for decades, shifted uncomfortably. His hands trembled as he clutched the edge of his gloves. "Sir," he began carefully, his voice hesitant. Adrian's eyes narrowed. "What?" The butler swallowed hard, then finally forced the truth out. "Sir, she ran away with her boyfriend, and she's filed for divorce." The words cracked through the silence like thunder outside. For the first time in years, Adrian Blackwood's hand faltered. The glass of whiskey slipped from his grip and shattered against the marble floor, amber liquid spreading like blood. For a man who had always been in control, who dictated the terms of every business deal, every personal matter, the idea that someone had walked away from him was unthinkable. What? Adrian's voice dropped low, but the fury simmering beneath it made the butler flinch. "She left, sir. I found this." The butler extended a folded letter, sealed in delicate handwriting Adrian instantly recognized. Elena's handwriting. Adrian snatched it, tearing it open. His eyes scanned the words, and though his face betrayed little, the storm inside him roared. "Adrian, I have spent years waiting for you to look at me not as your wife in name, not as a trophy you acquired through business alliances, but as a woman who once dreamed of love, warmth and laughter. But I can't keep waiting for something you never planned to give. I don't need a crown without love. I'd rather walk in the rain with someone who cares than sit in gold beside someone who feels nothing. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. Don't look for me. This time, I choose my own happiness. Elena." Adrian's jaw tightened, his knuckles turning white as he crumpled the letter in his fist. His chest rose and fell, a war between disbelief and rage burning through him. "No one," he muttered, his voice like gravel. "No one walks away from me." The butler dared not respond. He had served Adrian since the man was a boy, but never had he seen him look like this, like a lion wounded in pride, ready to destroy anything that challenged his dominance. Adrian strode toward the tall window, staring into the rain. Memories, uninvited and unrelenting, flashed before him. Elena, on their wedding day, her eyes soft but guarded. Elena, sitting across from him at endless dinners, trying to spark conversation while he drowned himself in business calls. Elena, standing in the garden alone at night, her hand brushing against flowers as if they could comfort her in ways he never did. He had noticed, he had seen, but he chose to ignore it because to Adrian Blackwood, emotions were weaknesses. Love was a liability. Until tonight. Now, the very woman who had once quietly waited for him had slipped through his fingers and had done the one thing he never anticipated. She chose another man. His phone buzzed on the desk. It was his lawyer. Adrian answered with clipped control. Yes. The lawyer hesitated on the line. Sir, I've just received official notice. Your wife, Mrs. Elena Blackwood, has indeed filed for divorce. The word divorce echoed in his ear like a gunshot. Adrian ended the call without replying. His reflection in the glass window looked back at him, the image of a powerful man. But tonight, a man who had been defeated not in boardrooms, but in his own home. The storm outside raged harder, as if mocking him, but as the thunder roared, Adrian's lips curled into a dangerous smile. She thinks she can leave me, he whispered. She thinks she can run into another man's arms and escape. His eyes darkened. No, I'll bring her back. Not because she's my wife, but because no one defies Adrian Blackwood. And just like that, his obsession began not out of love, but out of pride. But what Adrian did not realize was this. Sometimes, when you chase someone not with love but with control, you end up discovering truths about yourself you never wanted to face, and sometimes the very person you thought belonged to you becomes the one who teaches you what love really means. The storm outside finally broke with a flash of lightning just as Adrian whispered again into the night. Elena, you will come back to me. Morning sunlight streamed through the curtains of a modest apartment. The air smelled faintly of freshly brewed coffee, and the faint sound of laughter filled the room. For the first time in years, Elena Blackwood woke up without the suffocating weight of the Blackwood estate pressing down on her chest. She stretched, feeling the softness of the blanket around her. No maids, no rigid schedule, no cold husband waiting silently at the breakfast table. Just freedom. Across the small kitchen, Daniel hummed as he poured coffee into 2 cups. His presence was warm, unpretentious, so unlike Adrian's towering figure and commanding aura. Morning, Daniel said, his eyes lighting up when he saw her. Elena smiled faintly, still adjusting to the new rhythm of her life. Morning. He handed her a cup, his hand brushing against hers with casual affection. Elena's chest tightened. It had been so long since someone had touched her not as a possession, but as a person. They sat together by the small window overlooking the street. Outside, people bustled about their day, young students heading to classes, shopkeepers opening shutters, couples walking hand in hand. Elena sipped her coffee, savoring its warmth. It wasn't luxury. It wasn't power. But it was real. Daniel watched her quietly for a moment. You look lighter, he said softly. Elena tilted her head. Lighter, like you're finally breathing for yourself. Her lips curved faintly. He was right. For years, she had been caged in the Blackwood mansion, where every wall whispered of control, where her voice never mattered, and where her husband barely spared her a glance unless it was for appearances. She had begged for scraps of affection, waiting for Adrian to notice her, to see her as more than a name on a marriage certificate. But he never did. Now, sitting here with Daniel, she realized how foolish she had been to wait. Maybe I am lighter, she whispered. Maybe this is what freedom feels like. Daniel's hand reached across the table, covering hers. Elena, you don't owe him anything. You've given enough. This can be your beginning. She squeezed his hand back, nodding. For the first time, she allowed herself to hope. But while Elena breathed freely in her new life, Adrian was suffocating. In his mansion, he hadn't slept. Papers littered his desk, documents, surveillance reports, phone records. His mind, usually sharp and calculated, was now consumed with a single thought. Where is she? track every financial transaction in her name. Adrian ordered his head of security over the phone. Credit cards, bank withdrawals, anything. I want a full report by tonight. Yes, sir. He ended the call, pacing. The mansion that once stood as his fortress now felt empty, stripped of something invisible. His eyes fell on the crumpled letter Elena had left behind. He picked it up, smoothing it against his palm, rereading the words he had nearly memorized. I'd rather walk in the rain with someone who cares. His jaw clenched. Who was this man? This boyfriend who dared to take what belonged to him. The thought twisted his pride. Adrian wasn't used to losing, not in business, not in power, not in life. And yet, Elena had slipped away. Sir, the butler entered quietly. Should I leave me? Adrian snapped, his voice sharp enough to cut stone. When the butler left, Adrian sat heavily in his chair, staring at the fire. A memory surfaced unbidden. Elena on a rainy afternoon, years ago, standing by the garden's fountain, soaked yet smiling faintly. He had passed her by without a word, brushing off her attempt to share something she had painted. She had wanted him to look, to notice, and he never had. Adrian's fingers tightened against the armrest of his chair. Now another man was noticing her. Days passed. Adrian's men traced Elena's trail: ATM withdrawals in small amounts, discreet hotel stays. Finally, the rental of a small apartment in the city under Daniel's name. At last, Adrian had an address. That evening, dressed in his immaculate black suit, Adrian stood across the street from the modest apartment building. The storm from earlier in the week had passed, leaving the night unusually clear. He leaned against his sleek black car, watching the lit window on the second floor. And then he saw her, Elena. She was laughing, her hair tied loosely, wearing a simple dress. No diamonds, no silk, no servant waiting on her. Just Elena, radiant in her simplicity. Beside her was Daniel, setting the table for dinner. Adrian's eyes narrowed at the sight of his hand brushing hers, at the ears in her smile. It was a smile Adrian had never seen directed at him. His chest tightened, something foreign gnawing at him. Was it anger, envy, regret? He didn't know. He only knew one thing: she was supposed to be his. Later that night, Elena stood at the small balcony, gazing at the city lights. Daniel was inside, cleaning up the dishes, humming again. Her hand rested on the railing as she whispered to herself, maybe I really can start over. But just as she turned to go inside, her eyes caught a dark silhouette across the street. Her heart stopped. There, in the shadows, stood Adrian Blackwood, watching. His presence was unmistakable, even from afar. The commanding posture, the aura of power, the sharpness in his gaze that could pierce glass. Elena's breath hitched. He had found her. Adrian didn't move. He simply stood there, letting her see him, letting her know she wasn't free yet. Their eyes locked across the distance, hers wide, fearful yet resolute, his cold, possessive, and burning with something even he couldn't name. For a moment, the world stilled. No cars, no noise, no city bustle, just two souls bound by a broken marriage, staring across the gap of choices and consequences. Then Adrian's lips moved silently. You're mine. Elena's grip on the railing tightened. She shook her head slowly, defiantly, before stepping back into the apartment and shutting the curtains. But Adrian remained outside, his eyes fixed on the balcony, where she had stood. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next morning, Elena stood at the counter of the small flower shop where she had just started working. The scent of roses and lilies filled the air. wrapping the little shop in warmth and serenity. It was humble, nothing compared to the glittering galas of the Blackwood family, but Elena loved it. Here, she wasn't Mrs. Blackwood. She was just Elena, a woman finding her footing again. Her hands moved gently over the petals as she arranged a bouquet for a customer. For once, her smile was effortless. The bell above the door chimed, and her co-worker greeted the new customer. Elena didn't look up right away, busy tying a ribbon around the flowers. Elena, the voice cut through the shop like a knife. Deep, firm, icy. Her hand froze. Slowly, she looked up. There he was. Adrian Blackwood, in a perfectly tailored black suit, his presence so commanding that even the flowers seemed to wither under his gaze. His broad shoulders filled the doorway, his cold eyes locked on her like a hawk on prey. The shop seemed to fall silent. Even her co-worker glanced nervously between them before retreating to the back. Elena's lips parted, her throat dry. "What are you doing here?" Adrian stepped forward, his polished shoes clicking against the wooden floor. "You left without my permission." Her heart pounded, but she forced her chin up. "I don't need your permission anymore. I filed for divorce." The words hit him like a slap. His jaw tightened, but his face remained unreadable. "You think a piece of paper can sever what we are?" "What we are?" Elena's voice trembled, anger bubbling beneath her calm. "We were nothing, Adrian. Nothing but a business arrangement dressed as a marriage. You never loved me. You never even tried." For the first time, his eyes flickered just for a second, but then his mask returned. He stepped close, enough for her to smell his familiar cologne, the one that used to intimidate her. "You are my wife," he said coldly. "And wives don't run away. They belong with their husbands." Elena's hand curled into a fist at her side. Once those words would have crushed her. Once she would have lowered her head, swallowed her pain, and obeyed. But not now. She looked him straight in the eye and whispered, "I'm not your possession." The air between them crackled, thick with tension. Adrian's fingers twitched, as if he wanted to grab her wrist, to pull her back into the cage she had escaped. But Elena's eyes, fierce, unyielding, stopped him. A bell rang again. Daniel stepped into the shop, holding a bag of groceries, his cheerful smile fading instantly when he saw Adrian standing there. "Elena," Daniel's voice hardened as he set the bag down. "What is he doing here?" Adrian turned, sizing him up with a cold, dismissive glare. "So, you're the boyfriend?" Daniel didn't flinch. "And you're the man who never deserved her." The tension snapped like a taut wire. Adrian's eyes darkened, his lips curling in disdain. "Careful, boy. You're playing with fire." Daniel stepped forward, placing himself between Adrian and Elena. "Maybe. But at least I know how to hold fire without letting it burn the person I love." Elena's breath caught. For years, no one had ever stood up for her against Adrian. Not her family, not friends, not even herself. But Daniel did. Adrian's gaze flicked between the two of them, and something inside him twisted, something ugly and sharp. Seeing her standing behind Daniel, seeing her choose to stand there instead of beside him, was like swallowing broken glass. But instead of rage, his lips curved into a slow, dangerous smile. "This isn't over," he said, his voice low, promising. "Not by a long shot." He turned and left the shop, the bell chiming behind him as the door shut. The silence that followed was suffocating. Elena sank onto a stool, her knees weak. Daniel knelt in front of her, taking her trembling hands into his. "Are you okay?" She nodded faintly, though her heart was racing. "He found me." Daniel's jaw clenched. Let him look. He can't control you anymore. You're free now, Elena. And I'll make sure he never takes that from you again. Her eyes watered, but not from fear. From something she hadn't felt in years: protection, safety. But as Daniel held her, Elena couldn't shake the chill of Adrian's last words. This isn't over, and deep down, she knew he meant it. That night, Adrian stood in his car overlooking the shop from a distance, the city lights glinting against the hood of his sleek black vehicle. His reflection stared back at him from the windshield, controlled, unreadable, dangerous. He whispered to himself, "She thinks she can defy me. She thinks she can love another man." His fingers tapped against the steering wheel, each strike echoing his restraint. She'll see. She'll see she belongs with me. Yet in the pit of his chest, beneath the layers of ego and fury, something else stirred. Something he had buried long ago. A flicker of doubt. A flicker of regret. But Adrian Blackwood wasn't ready to admit that. Not yet. For now, he had only one mission: to reclaim the wife who dared to run. The city never slept, but Adrian Blackwood didn't notice the glittering lights or the hum of traffic. He sat in his penthouse office, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the skyline, his mind consumed by one thought: Elena. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her, not the silent wife who used to wait for him at their mansion, but the woman he had seen in that flower shop. Strong, defiant, untouchable. The image unsettled him. He was used to controlling boardrooms full of men who bowed under his decisions. But Elena had looked him in the eye and told him he didn't own her. That truth clung to him like a thorn. He picked up the phone. "Freeze her bank accounts," he ordered coldly. On the other end, his financial advisor hesitated. "Sir, you heard me. Any account under Elena Blackwood's name, shut it down. Now." "Yes, sir." Adrian hung up, leaning back in his chair. If she thought she could walk away, she would soon learn how impossible it was to survive without him. But hours later, when his security team brought him the updated report, his brows furrowed. "Sir," his head of security explained carefully, "she hasn't touched the joint accounts. She closed them herself before leaving." Adrian's eyes darkened. "What? She's been living on her own earnings. Her name is no longer on any of the major accounts linked to you. She's financially independent." Adrian's grip on the file tightened. Elena had outmaneuvered him. The woman he thought was fragile, helpless, had prepared her escape long before he realized she was gone. Meanwhile, Elena walked through the city with Daniel at her side. She carried a small stack of papers, proof of her new bank account, her legal documents, the finalized steps of the divorce process. Every step felt like freedom carved out of chains. At the CAF, where they stopped for lunch, Elena checked her phone and smiled faintly. "They froze my old accounts," she said, sliding the papers into her bag. "Just as I expected." Daniel frowned. "Adrian," she nodded. "Of course. That's his way of reminding me I'm nothing without him. But I've already built my own way out." Daniel reached across the table, touching her hand gently. "You're stronger than he'll ever admit. You don't need him, Elena. You never did." She smiled softly. For the first time, she believed those words. But Adrian wasn't finished. The next evening, Elena walked into the flower shop only to find the landlord waiting at the door, arms crossed. "Mrs. Black, I mean, Miss Elena," he corrected himself nervously. I'm afraid I have to terminate your lease here." Elena froze. "What? Why?" I don't want trouble." Someone came by, offered to buy the entire building at double market value. The condition was that your shop couldn't stay. Her chest tightened. She didn't need to ask who. Only one man had the arrogance and resources to erase her life. In a single move, Adrian, she whispered. The landlord's eyes darted away. I'm sorry, Elena. Truly. She stood in the empty shop, her heart pounding with both fury and fear. He wasn't just chasing her, he was stripping away her independence, piece by piece. But instead of crumbling, Elena straightened her back. If Adrian wanted a war, he would see a side of her he had never imagined. That night, when she returned to the apartment, Adrian was waiting. He leaned against his car parked outside, his black suit flawless, his expression unreadable. As she approached with Daniel, Adrian's eyes locked on hers. Elena, he said smoothly, as if nothing had happened, get in the car. We need to talk. She laughed bitterly. Talk? You froze my accounts, destroyed my workplace, and expect me to talk? His jaw twitched, but he stayed calm. You're my wife. I filed for divorce. That means nothing to me. Her eyes flared. Then let me make it clear. I don't love you, Adrian. I never did. Not the man you were. Daniel stepped closer, his arm protective around her shoulders. You heard her. Leave? Adrian's gaze flicked to Daniel, sharp as a blade. Do you think you can protect her? From me? Do you even know the world she's from? She belongs in power, in wealth, not in your little rented apartment. Elena cut in before Daniel could speak. Her voice was steady, cold. You're wrong, Adrian. I don't belong in your world. I never did. And I'd rather share one cup of coffee with Daniel than live a lifetime of silence with you. Her words hit him like a blow. For a brief second, something cracked in his expression, an emotion buried too deep to name. But then, just as quickly, he masked it. This isn't over, he repeated, his voice low, dangerous. He slipped into his car, the engine roaring as he drove off into the night. Elena exhaled shakily, her body trembling. Daniel pulled her close. You did good. You stood up to him. But as Elena leaned against Daniel, she knew this battle was far from finished. Adrian wasn't a man who accepted defeat, and for the first time, a part of her wondered, was he trying to drag her back? Or was he beginning to realize what he had lost? That night, Adrian sat alone in his study, a glass of whiskey, untouched beside him. For once, silence weighed heavily on him, not the comforting silence of control, but the hollow silence of emptiness. He closed his eyes and saw her again, her fire, her strength, her refusal to bend, and instead of anger, something else twisted in his chest, something unfamiliar, something dangerously close to regret. I still remember that night vividly. The moment that shattered Ethan's pride and brought me face to face with the consequences of my choices. The grand mansion, usually filled with the quiet hum of servants and the crackle of the fireplace, stood unnervingly silent. Ethan had been away on business, and the staff had been ordered to keep everything ready for his return. He was known for his discipline, his cold commands, and his iron control. But that night, the control slipped. He had arrived at the mansion with his usual crisp stride, coat draped over his shoulders, face sharp as a blade. His first words echoed in the vast hall, cutting through the silence. Bring my wife home. Now, the butler, a man who had served Ethan's family for decades, trembled slightly. His hands fidgeted behind his back as though clutching onto invisible courage. He bowed his head and whispered the words that would ignite the storm. Sir. She ran away with her boyfriend and filed for divorce. For a moment, Ethan did not breathe. The silence stretched so far that even the ticking of the antique clock on the wall seemed like a hammer striking the truth deeper into the air. "Say that again." His voice was low, dangerous. "She is gone, sir. The madam has left. And the papers arrived this morning. The papers." The finality. Ethan's jaw tightened, and his hand shot out, sweeping a crystal vase from the table. It shattered across the marble floor, fragments scattering like pieces of his pride, his wife, his possession, his carefully maintained image of control gone. She had slipped from his grasp without permission, but what Ethan didn't know was that her escape had not been impulsive. It had been planned. Carefully, quietly, desperately, because love, when suffocated, eventually claws its way toward freedom. Her name was Lila. My heart aches even now when I think of her smile, the one that never reached her eyes in the mansion. She had once loved Ethan, or at least believed she could, but love cannot grow in a cage of coldness. And every day, Ethan's distance, his business, his arrogance had drained the warmth from her. Until one day, she looked at herself in the gilded mirror of their bedroom and saw not a wife, not a woman cherished, but a shadow. And that's when Daniel came into the picture. Daniel was nothing like Ethan. He was warm, spontaneous, reckless in a way that made her laugh like a girl again. He didn't give her diamonds or silk gowns. He gave her attention. He listened. He remembered little things like how she hated roses but adored lilies, or how she secretly sang when she cooked. It was never supposed to be more than friendship. But one afternoon, when Ethan had cancelled yet another dinner, Daniel had looked at her with that raw honesty in his eyes. And Lila had realized how empty her marriage truly was. So she planned her escape. And on the night before Ethan's return, she left. Back in the mansion, Ethan stood in the wreckage of his pride. His hands trembled, but not from sadness. No, Ethan was not a man who cried. He was a man who conquered. And now, his wife had dared to humiliate him. "Find her," he ordered. His voice was colder than the frost outside. "I don't care what it takes. Bring her back to me." But there was something he didn't realize. This wasn't just a wife running away. This was a woman reclaiming her life. And when Ethan finally found her, nothing would be as he expected. When I woke the next morning, sunlight was streaming through the tall windows, but there was no warmth in it. My head throbbed from the storm of thoughts that had kept me awake all night. The image of Claire's tear-streaked face haunted me. Her last words echoed like a curse. "If you ever truly loved me, let me go." I dragged myself to the study, the room that had once smelled of fresh ink and wood polish. Today, it smelled like grief. I opened the drawer of my desk and found an old photograph. It was of our wedding day. Claire, in her delicate lace gown, was smiling at me like I was the only man in the world. I had forgotten that smile, forgotten the softness in her eyes. Somewhere along the way, I had buried her under business, power and pride, and now she was gone. The butler entered quietly, hesitant. "Sir," he said, lowering his voice, "the news is spreading in town. They say Madam ran away with a man. The family's name." He trailed off, but the implication was clear. My name was being dragged through the dirt. I clenched the photo in my hand so tightly it nearly tore. Shame burned in my veins, but it was nothing compared to the hollow ache inside. This wasn't just about reputation. It was about the woman who once chose me, but now had chosen another. "Did you find her?" I asked coldly. The butler shifted. "She left no trace. But her lawyer sent these." He handed me an envelope. "The divorce papers. For a long moment, I stared at the envelope as if it were a snake ready to strike. Then I opened it. Each line, carved deeper into me. Her signature at the bottom looked too final, too deliberate. Claire hadn't just run away. In a fit of emotion, she had planned this. She was serious. My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, though it was barely 10 in the morning, and sat back in my chair. The amber liquid burned down my throat, but it couldn't burn away the bitterness. Why, Claire? I whispered to the empty room. Was I really that blind? As if mocking me, the phone buzzed. It was one of my business associates. Hey, I heard about your wife, the man said bluntly. Running off with another guy, huh? Tough break. But listen, let's keep the merger talks moving, all right? I ended the call before he could finish. Their laughter, their gossip, it was all coming. And for the first time in years, I realized I didn't care about the deals, the wealth, the empire. None of it mattered if I had lost her. That night, I drove out of the city, past the glass towers and neon lights, past the suburbs where the streets grew quiet. I drove until I found myself near the ocean, where Claire used to love walking along the shore. I remembered how she once told me, "When I'm here, I feel free, like the waves understand me better than anyone else does." I sat on the hood of my car, staring at the endless horizon. For the first time in years, I asked myself a question I had avoided. Had I ever truly loved her, or had I just loved owning her? The memory of her laughter, the way she used to touch my arm when she was nervous, the way her eyes lit up when she read books late into the night, it all came flooding back. And in that moment I knew I had loved her. But love without care, without attention, was as good as neglect. And neglect was the very thing that had driven her away. As I sat there, lost in thought, I heard voices nearby. A couple walking along the beach. Their laughter carried on the breeze, warm and unguarded. And for a moment, I envied them. Not for their youth or freedom, but for the simple fact that they still had each other. I gripped the photo of Claire again. "This isn't over," I muttered. My voice was raw, but determined. She could run. She could file for divorce. She could even try to forget me. But I wasn't going to let our story end like this. Not without a fight. Not without showing her that the man she married was still somewhere inside me. And so, under the cold night sky, I made a silent vow. I would find her. Not to drag her back. Not to force her. But to prove to her, maybe for the first time, that my love was real. Little did I know, the road ahead would not just test my love, but my soul. Because sometimes, winning someone back doesn't mean getting them to return. It means facing truths you've spent your whole life running from. I couldn't sleep that night. The words from the butler and the sight of those divorce papers replayed in my mind like a broken record. My wife, no, my ex-wife now, according to that stack of legal documents, was gone. She hadn't just left me. She had carefully and deliberately removed herself from my life. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring into the darkness. For a man who thought he had control over everything, business, power, money, influence, I realized I had no control over the one thing that truly mattered: love. The truth was brutal, but it was clear. She didn't just slip away. She ran. She wanted to run from me, but why? That question burned me alive. I thought back to our early years together. She wasn't the type to betray. She wasn't a gold digger. She wasn't heartless. She had once looked at me like I was her whole world. I couldn't erase the memory of her eyes, bright, full of warmth, always softening whenever they met my daughters, or when had those eyes grown cold? Was it when I became too consumed with work? Was it when I stopped noticing the small things? Did I ignore her pain without realizing it? I rubbed my temples, pacing the room like a madman. The more I thought about it, the more suffocated I felt. And then came the thought I couldn't escape. What if she didn't run because of love? What if she ran because of fear? Of me? The realization cut deep. My tone, my coldness, the distance I put between us while drowning in meetings, contracts, and boardrooms. Had I become a stranger in my own marriage? The following morning, I called for the butler again. He entered the study quietly, clearly still cautious after last night's storm. Did she leave a letter? A message? Anything? I asked, my voice quieter this time. The butler hesitated. There was something, sir, but I didn't know if you wanted to see it. My heart clenched. Show me. He placed an envelope on the table. My name was written on it in her delicate handwriting. My chest tightened just seeing it. Hands trembling slightly, I tore it open. Her words were simple, but devastating. You stopped seeing me. You stopped hearing me. I begged silently for you to notice, but you never did. I can't live in the shadow of your world anymore. I want to breathe again. I want to love and be loved freely. Don't look for me. Each sentence stabbed at me like a blade. She hadn't left because she hated me. She left because she no longer believed I loved her. I slammed my fist against the desk, furious not at her, but at myself. How blind had I been? I had mistaken silence for peace, her soft smiles for happiness, and her patience for contentment. But all along she had been screaming in ways I chose not to hear. That night, I poured myself a drink and stared out the massive window overlooking the city lights. They sparkled endlessly, mocking me, reminding me of the empire I had built at the cost of the one thing I couldn't replace. But then another thought emerged, a dangerous, relentless one. If she thought she could disappear from my life so easily, she was wrong. I wasn't going to let her go, not without answers, not without seeing her face to face. And so, with a cold, firm resolve, I picked up my phone. Find her. I ordered my private investigator. I don't care what it takes. I don't care who she's with. I need to know where she is. But little did I know, the truth I was chasing was far darker, far more complicated than I could ever imagine. Because she hadn't just run away with another man. She had run away from something much bigger, something that would shatter every belief I had about us, about myself, and about the life we once shared. And that truth was already on its way to destroy me. The next morning, Ethan sat in his office, his mind heavy with the events of last night. His phone buzzed. It was Marcus. Ethan, we need to talk. I have something you should see. Ethan frowned. What is it? Meet me at the old law firm. Bring no one. Ethan felt a pit form in his stomach. Marcus had been his loyal friend, but lately he seemed nervous, guarded. When Ethan arrived, Marcus handed him a file. Inside were documents, legal papers, witness statements, and photographs. Ethan's blood ran cold. Your wife didn't leave you willingly, Marcus said softly. She was forced. Ethan's jaw tightened. What are you talking about? Marcus pointed at one of the photographs. It showed Isabella with a man, someone Ethan didn't recognize, but her body language was stiff, her smile forced. That's her so-called boyfriend, Marcus explained. Name's Adrian Cole. He has a record. Extortion. Fraud. He targeted her. Used her vulnerability against her. Ethan slammed his fist against the table. So the divorce papers, fabricated. I dug into the legal filings. They're fake. Someone forged her signature. Ethan's vision blurred with rage. Who the hell is behind this? Marcus hesitated. His silence made Ethan suspicious. Marcus, Ethan said slowly, his tone sharp, how long have you known this? Marcus swallowed hard. A few weeks. But I wanted to be sure before telling you. If I'd spoken earlier, and it turned out false, I would have shattered what little trust you had left. Ethan clenched his fists. A mixture of betrayal and gratitude surged within him. You should have told me sooner. Marcus lowered his head. I know. But listen. There's more. Adrian isn't working alone. He's tied to a network people who profit from breaking marriages, taking settlements, draining wealthy families. Your wife isn't the first victim. The revelation shook Ethan to his core. Suddenly, the pieces of the puzzle began to fit. Isabella's betrayal, the divorce papers, her disappearance, it was all orchestrated. But one thing still didn't make sense. Why didn't she tell me? Ethan whispered. Why didn't she trust me enough to fight this together? Marcus placed a hand on his shoulder. Because she thought you wouldn't believe her. Because she thought you'd already chosen your pride over her love. The words pierced Ethan like a blade. He remembered the coldness in his own voice, the way he had dismissed her concerns in the past, the countless times he had chosen business over family. He had pushed her into silence, and now she was gone. That night, Ethan sat alone in his study, staring at the divorce papers Marcus had exposed as frauds. He lit the fireplace, watching the flames dance. Forced or not, he muttered under his breath, I will bring you home, Isabella, even if I have to burn down the wall to do it. But in the shadows outside his mansion, a figure stood watching. Adrian Cole, with a smirk playing on his lips, whispered into his phone, he's taking the bait. Keep her hidden. The longer he searches, the more desperate he'll become. And when the time is right, we'll crush him. The game had only just begun. I could no longer sit idle. Every moment Isabella remained in that network's grip was a moment stolen from me, stolen from the life we had once dreamed of together. I called Marcus. I want names, locations, everything you've got on Adrian Cole and his associates. I'm going after her myself. Marcus hesitated. Ethan, this is dangerous. He's not just any man. He's ruthless. You have to be careful. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Caution had no place here. My heart demanded action. Why the next morning, I had mobilized a small team of private investigators, trustworthy, discreet, and relentless. We traced her last known locations, combed through hotel records, surveillance footage, and financial trails. Every lead pointed to a single city, a sprawling metropolis where Adrian Cole had his headquarters, a place hidden behind layers of legitimate businesses and shell companies. Driving there, my hands clenched the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I kept telling myself to remain calm, to plan carefully. But the thought of her, possibly terrified, possibly alone, propelled me forward. When we arrived, the city felt alive with motion, a world apart from the quiet life we had once shared. I couldn't lose her here. Not now. We split up, tracking every known contact, every known address. Hours passed like minutes. My heart raced with each call, each lead, each small piece of information that brought me closer, and then we found him. Adrian Cole. I saw him in a crowded street, standing casually as if he owned the city, talking to one of his associates. His attention, however, was not on the bustling crowd, it was on a woman walking 2 steps behind him. Isabella. She was alive. She was unharmed, but her eyes were guarded, scanning every direction with the subtle tension of someone forced to be cautious. And then, when she caught sight of me across the street, our eyes met. For a heartbeat, everything froze. She didn't run toward me. She didn't wave. She only gave a faint nod, almost imperceptible. Relief and pain collided in my chest. She was here, but she wasn't free. Not yet. I moved closer, keeping my distance to avoid drawing attention. Adrian noticed me. His eyes narrowed. The smirk on his face hardened into a threatening curl. "You're in over your head, Blackwood," Adrian hissed under his breath. I didn't respond. My gaze remained fixed on Isabella. My love. My wife. My fault. The moment was fragile, delicate like glass teetering on the edge of a table. One wrong move, one misstep, and it would shatter. Adrian gestured suddenly, and Isabella flinched ever so slightly, confirming what I had feared. She wasn't walking willingly. She was trapped. That night, I rented a safe apartment across the street from Adrian's building. I needed to observe, to understand, to plan. I couldn't storm in recklessly, not yet. I had to be precise. Every step had to bring her closer to freedom. From my vantage point, I watched her routine, the way she left the building for brief errands, the way she paused at the corner CAF, glancing over her shoulder. Every glance told me she was waiting for me, hoping I would see her, that I would rescue her from the invisible chains binding her. I whispered her name softly into the darkness. "Isabella, I'm coming. I will find a way." Adrian remained unaware that my obsession was not about power or pride anymore. It was about her. The woman I had failed, but now vowed to protect at all costs. But I knew, deep down, that getting to her would be more than just a challenge. It would be a war. A war not just against Adrian Cole and his network, but against the consequences of my own neglect. And when I finally reached her, everything would change. The night air was thick with tension. Every step I took toward Adrian Cole's building felt like a gamble, a dance with danger that could end before it even began. My heart pounded not with fear, but with determination. Isabella was close. She was so close. I parked a block away and surveyed the entrance. Security cameras, guards, locked doors. Everything screamed control. But I didn't care about appearances. I cared about her. I slipped inside, using a side entrance Marcus had found, moving silently through the shadows. Every heartbeat echoed like a drum, every breath a whisper of urgency. And then I saw her, Isabella, standing by the stairwell, tense, alert, eyes flicking nervously to every passing shadow. She froze when she saw me, and I could see the mix of relief and fear in her gaze. She wanted to run toward me, but she couldn't. Adrian's presence was too close, and then he appeared. Adrian Cole, tall, imposing, calm like a storm waiting to break. He caught sight of me instantly, the smirk on his face twisting into something sharper, more dangerous. "You shouldn't have come here, Blackwood," he said, his voice low but lethal. I didn't flinch. "Let her go, Adrian. She doesn't belong with you." Adrian chuckled, a cold sound that filled the stairwell. "Belong? That's a funny word coming from a man who let her leave without realizing her worth. She's mine to control." And you, his eyes glinted. "You're not strong enough to stop me." I took a step forward. "Try me." The tension cracked like a whip. Adrian lunged and I dodged instinctively. Shadows danced across the walls as the two of us collided in a silent storm, fists moving, each strike a test of strength and will. Isabella stayed frozen, torn between running and intervening. Her hands shook, but her eyes were locked on mine, silently urging me to protect her. Finally, I grabbed her hand. "We need to go. Now." Adrian's gaze fell on us, fury and disbelief battling in his eyes. "You think it's that easy?" I didn't answer. I pulled Isabella toward the stairwell, weaving through the maze of hallways, my mind focused on one thing: freedom. We burst out onto the street, the cool night air hitting us like a promise. Isabella ran beside me, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't look over her shoulder. Not because the danger was gone, but because she trusted me to shield her. Adrian appeared at the entrance moments later, his silhouette menacing against the lights of the building. "This isn't over, Blackwood," he shouted, his voice cutting through the night. I didn't look back. I didn't have time. I had her, and that was enough. We ducked into a narrow alley, breathing heavily, hearts pounding in unison. Isabella's fingers intertwined with mine, her grip firm but trembling. I thought I'd never see you again," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of our racing hearts. "I'll never let anyone take you from me again," I replied, my voice steady, though inside I was roaring. Not him, not anyone. But even as we disappeared into the night, a part of me knew the fight wasn't over. Adrian would come for her again. He was relentless, dangerous, and he wasn't the only one involved in this twisted web. Our journey to freedom had begun, but the path ahead was filled with shadows. Shadows that could destroy everything we had fought for, everything we were trying to reclaim. And yet, for the first time, I felt something I hadn't in years. Hope. Hope that we could be together. Hope that love, even after betrayal and fear, could survive. Hope that we could finally be free. We didn't stop running until the city lights were behind us, swallowed by the darkness of a quieter neighborhood. I rented a small apartment under a false name, a place off the grid where Isabella could breathe without fear of Adrian's looming shadow. For the first time in weeks, she sat on the couch, staring at her hands. I watched her quietly, giving her the space she needed, letting the silence stretch without pressure. "You're safe now," I said finally, my voice soft but steady. "No one can touch you here." She looked up, eyes glistening with unshed tears. I didn't know if you'd come. I thought maybe." Her voice faltered. "Maybe you'd let me go." I shook my head. "Never. You can't imagine what it's like to lose you even for a moment." She smiled faintly, the first genuine smile in what felt like an eternity. "I'm scared," she admitted. "What if he finds us?" I placed my hands over hers. "Then we'll fight together, you and I." For a moment, the world felt still, as if time itself had paused to let us breathe. But deep down, I knew this calm was temporary. Adrian was relentless. He didn't just want control, he wanted to break us. The next few days were a delicate balance of hiding and planning. Marcus helped, checking in with updates on Adrian's movements, tracing financial trails, and uncovering connections we hadn't known existed. Every day, we learned something new about his network, people who manipulated, intimidated, and destroyed lives for profit. One evening, as Isabella and I prepared dinner, I noticed her staring at the window, tense. "What is it?" I asked. She shook her head. "I don't know. I just feel like he's close, watching." My stomach clenched. She wasn't imagining it. Adrian had eyes everywhere. That night, Marcus called with news that confirmed our fears. Adrian had discovered the approximate location of the apartment. He hadn't attacked yet, he was calculating, but the threat was imminent. We needed a plan, fast. I sat down with Isabella, taking her hands in mine. "Listen to me. We're going to move tomorrow. New location, tighter security, nobody knows where we are. We can't stay here, she nodded, her trust in me unwavering. I'll follow you anywhere. And just like that, we prepared to vanish again, this time not out of fear, but with strategy, with purpose. But Adrian had one more weapon we hadn't accounted for: manipulation. A message arrived on her phone, untraceable, chilling in its simplicity. You think you're free. You belong with me. Run, hide, it won't matter. You can't escape what's yours. Her hand trembled as she showed me. I held her close, feeling the weight of her fear and determination all at once. He can try, I said quietly, but he won't win. Not if I'm with you. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and for the first time since this nightmare began, we allowed ourselves a moment of fragile peace. But I knew, deep down, that Adrian's next move wouldn't just be physical, it would be personal. He would try to break her emotionally, to make her doubt me, to exploit every fear she had buried deep inside. And when that moment came, we would have to be stronger than ever, because love alone might not be enough. The city had never felt so suffocating. Every shadow seemed to watch, every passerby a potential spy. We had moved twice in a week, constantly changing addresses, using cash, leaving no traces. Yet, I could feel Adrian's presence closing in, even from a distance. But this time, I wasn't waiting to be reactive. I was going to take control. Marcus had uncovered something crucial. Adrian's true plan wasn't just to control Isabella, it was to ruin me financially and socially, to make me powerless, and to trap her in a life of fear so that she would return out of despair. That's when I realized the only way to end this was to confront him directly. I arranged for a location, a deserted warehouse at the edge of the city. Marcus helped set the scene to minimize collateral damage, ensuring that the only players in this confrontation would be Adrian, Isabella, and me. As we approached, Isabella squeezed my hand, her eyes reflecting both fear and trust. Are you sure about this? She whispered. I nodded. It ends tonight. We face him together, and we take back our lives. The warehouse was dimly lit, shadows stretching like claws across the concrete floor. Adrian stood in the center, flanked by a few of his associates. His smirk was there, but so was a hint of unease. He had underestimated me. You came, he said, voice smooth but edged with venom. I was beginning to think you'd run like the coward you've proven to be. I stepped forward, Isabella beside me. This ends now, Adrian. You've hurt her enough. You won't touch her or anyone else ever again. Adrian laughed, a low, chilling sound. Touch her. She's mine. She always was. And you'll see just how powerless you really are. He lunged. I met him head on, our fists colliding. With a force that echoed through the empty warehouse, every strike was fueled by months of anger, regret, and love. I fought not just for victory, but to protect the woman I had failed to cherish properly before. Meanwhile, Isabella watched, tense, but she was no longer the frightened woman from weeks ago. Her presence, her trust, was my anchor. Every glance she gave me reminded me of what I was fighting for, not revenge, but life, freedom, and love. Finally, after what felt like hours but was only minutes, I pinned Adrian to the floor, breathing heavily, muscles screaming, but heart unwavering. Enough, I shouted. It's over. You lose. He glared, defeated, realizing the fight was not just physical. He couldn't break her. He couldn't manipulate her anymore. And he certainly couldn't break me, not the man I had become, not the man who had learned how to truly love. Adrian's associates fled, leaving him on the cold concrete. I stood and extended a hand, not to hurt him further, but to show that the fight was for Isabella, not vengeance. Turning to Isabella, I took her hands in mine. "Are you ready to leave this behind? To be free?" Tears welled in her eyes as she nodded. "Yes, I'm ready." With you. For the first time in weeks, we stepped out of darkness and into the night. The city lights no longer felt suffocating. They were a promise of life, love, and choice. In that moment, I understood that love wasn't about control or possession. Love was about trust, sacrifice, and showing up when it mattered most. And for the first time, I vowed silently I would never take that for granted again. We walked away together, hand in hand, leaving behind shadows, threats, and the remnants of a past that had tried to define us. Isabella looked up at me, a faint smile touching her lips. "I never thought we'd get here," I smiled back. "Neither did I. But we did. And now, we start again, on our own terms. The night was ours. The future was ours. And finally, love, not fear, not power, not pride, would guide us forward." Thanks for watching. Hoped you liked it. If you watched till the end, please comment love so that we could understand you were with us till the end. As well as, please let us know, where are you watching from? Before leaving, please hit the subscribe button, comment your thought, and share with your nearest and dearest one. See you in the next one. Until to the next one, spread love.